All right, let's dive in, shall we? Today, we're tackling a figure whose name alone evokes a pretty potent mix of, well, awe and terror. Idi Amin, the Butcher of Uganda.
A chilling nickname for sure.
Yeah. And his journey well, is anything but straightforward. We're talking poverty to presidency and ultimately to infamy.
Hmm.
Thankfully, we've got some incredible sources here that offer glimpses into Amin's life.
It's fascinating how Amin still manages to spark such strong reactions even all these years after his death.
For sure.
Some, they recall him with this blend of awe and fear, right? Thinking about his swift climb to power and the terror he unleashed. Then there are others, and this is the part that gets me, some actually see him as a symbol of anti-colonial resistance.
It's a wild mix, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think unraveling these totally conflicting perspectives is what makes this deep dive, well, so captivating.
Right. So let's start unpacking those early years, right? I
Mm.
mean, even his birthday is a bit of a mystery. Somewhere between 1925 and 1928.
Exactly. And this lack of proper records, I think it really speaks volumes about the realities for Native Africans during that era.
You're right. It really highlights those systemic inequalities that shaped his life, right from the start.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine growing up in poverty in a remote Ugandan town, limited education. That was his reality. But even amidst all these challenges, there were these glimmers, hints of his future ambition, his drive to overcome, defy the odds, really. He joins the British King's African Rifles, starts as a cook, and it's through, I think, sheer determination that he transforms himself into this skilled soldier.
And not just any soldier. I mean, the guy rises through the ranks like
Yeah.
rapidly, even then facing accusations of brutality.
Right.
And get this, the man was a boxing champion,
Yeah,
a testament to his, well, his physical prowess.
sure.
But I think what truly propelled his military career was that shrewd alliance he formed with Apollo Milton Obote, Uganda's future prime minister.
That alliance was absolutely pivotal. I mean, Amin, he proved his worth to Obote, quelling rebellions, restoring order during a mutiny. He was seen as this decisive leader,
Right.
albeit a ruthless one. And it's this effectiveness that I think masked a darker side, almost as if Amin thrived in these environments that rewarded brute force, where, well, the ends justified the means.
Which makes his coup against Obote in 1971, all the more intriguing.
Yeah.
Obote was away at a summit, and Amin, boom, seizes the opportunity.
A calculated move, absolutely.
Is fueled by, well, strategic planning and some pretty effective propaganda, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. And then, of course, there's that infamous self-proclaimed title. Oh, man.
Oh, yeah.
His Excellency President for Life Field Marshal, Alhaji Dr. Idi Amin, VC, DSO, MC, Lord of all the beasts of the earth and fishes of the sea, and conqueror of the British Empire and Africa in general, and Uganda in particular.
A mouthful.
It's not just a title, though, is it? It's
Yeah.
a declaration of absolute power, a glimpse into, well, Amin's growing megalomania.
And his desire to just be seen as larger than life.
Yeah.
And tragically, that power very quickly, manifests itself as horrific violence.
Mm-hmm.
Political opponents assassinated, members of the Akoli and Longo tribes targeted in these brutal purges. The Nile River, sadly, became this tragic silent witness with, well, countless bodies dumped into its waters.
It is difficult to truly grasp the sheer scale of the atrocities. The International Commission of Jurists and Amnesty International, their estimates put the death toll somewhere between 80,000 and a staggering 500,000 people.
Yeah.
And those are just estimates. The true number, we may never know.
It's unimaginable. And beyond the horrific violence, Amin also launched what he called an economic war, targeting Asians and Europeans.
Right.
Which, in the end, it really devastated the Ugandan economy.
Yeah.
And then he makes these surprising moves on the international stage,
Yeah.
constantly shifting alliances.
Well, you see, initially, the West saw Amin as a potential ally, a counter to Obote's, socialist leanings. But when those Western powers hesitated to give him advanced weaponry without, conditions, he turned to Gaddafi's Libya and the Soviet Union for support.
So opportunistic.
Yeah.
And his actions on the world stage, they were baffling at times.
Yeah.
Denouncing Zionism while simultaneously accepting aid from Israel.
Yeah.
Insulting global leaders, but also seeking their approval. It's almost like he thrived on this unpredictable persona.
Oh, that unpredictability. I think it was a key part of his strategy. Amin wasn't bound by convention or diplomacy.
Right.
It made him dangerous, but also kept the world guessing. What stands out to you about this period?
For me, It's the sheer audacity. We're talking about a man who rose from poverty and just wasn't afraid to challenge even the most powerful nations, even if it meant resorting to violence and terror.
Bold moves for sure.
But even with those bold moves, cracks were beginning to show in his regime, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, his audacity was definitely striking. And that boldness, well, it was on full display during the 1976 Entebbe airport hijacking. Amin's support for the hijackers, I mean, it thrust him onto the world stage, but with disastrous consequences, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. The Israeli raid to rescue the hostages was, well, it was a huge embarrassment for Am. And his response, I mean, it was a terrifying act of vengeance. The execution of Dora Bloch, an elderly British hostage, and then the senseless killings of Kenyans in retaliation for, their alleged support of Israel.
These actions, I think, more than ever, really cemented Amin's image as this brutal dictator with a blatant disregard for human life. It's a chilling reminder of the price innocent people paid for his ambition.
It's hard to imagine the level of paranoia that must have driven him to such extremes. He seemed to see enemies everywhere, even within his own inner circle, like the incident with his vice president, Mustafa Adrisi.
Ah, yes. Adrisi was severely injured in what was, well, widely believed to be a staged car accident. Amin, it seems, saw Adrisi as a potential threat to his authority. And this paranoia, well, it led to purges within the government and military, further destabilizing his already fragile regime.
And then there's the expulsion of Asians from Uganda in 1972. This wasn't just a political move, right? It was a blatant act of racism, really disguised as an economic war.
The expulsion of 60,000 Asians, most of Indian origin, I mean, it was a devastating blow to Uganda. These communities, they were integral to the economy. Their businesses, their expertise, they fueled much of the country's economic activity. Amin's actions, well, they created a refugee crisis, forcing thousands to flee, leaving behind everything they had built.
It's a truly dark chapter in his reign,
Yeah.
and he justified it all under the guise of empowering native Ugandans. The hypocrisy is staggering.
It was a textbook example of populist rhetoric, appealing to nationalist sentiment while consolidating his own power and enriching his supporters. And he employed similar tactics when he nationalized British-owned businesses, severing diplomatic ties with the UK in a show of defiance.
But wasn't there a time when Amin actually enjoyed support from the West?
Hey,
I remember reading that they initially saw him as a bulwark against communism in the region.
you're right. In the early days, Amin received support from countries like the UK and Israel. They saw him as a preferable alternative to Obo's socialist policies. But as Amin's brutality became impossible to ignore and his actions on the world stage, well, they grew increasingly erratic. That support quickly eroded.
Which brings us back to the Entebbe raid. It was a major international incident that further isolated Amin, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. The Entebbe raid, it exposed the limits of his power, his inability to control events within his own borders, and his vengeful response, the execution of Dora Bloch, the killings of Kenyans. It only served to further damage his already tarnished reputation. It was a turning point.
So given all of this internal unrest and international pressure was the invasion of Tanzania, a last desperate attempt to cling to power. Perhaps he thought he could rally his forces against an external enemy and deflect attention from the problems at home.
The invasion of Tanzania is a point of debate among historians. Was it a calculated distraction, a desperate bid to regain control over a fracturing army, or perhaps, as some believe, a delusional attempt to expand his territory?
And let's not forget that truly bizarre proposal he made, a boxing match with Tanzanian President Julius Nyerere to settle the conflict.
That's classic Amin. Even amidst war and chaos, he couldn't resist the theatrics. Of course, Nyerere dismissed the idea, leading to a full-scale counterattack by Tanzania. And that, as we know, marked the beginning of the end for Amin's reign.
Forced to flee into exile, first to Libya and then Saudi Arabia. Amin never faced justice for the countless atrocities committed under his rule. But even in exile, he continued to cast a long shadow over Uganda.
He funded rebel groups and remained unrepentant for his actions. A chilling testament to his unwavering belief in his own righteousness. His refusal to acknowledge the suffering he inflicted is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of his legacy.
It's almost impossible to reconcile the man who charmed the world with his charisma in the early days with
Yeah.
the ruthless dictator who orchestrated such horrific violence.
And that duality is at the heart of why Idi Amin continues to fascinate us.
It really is. It's like looking at two totally different people. The charismatic leader who initially won over the international community, and then the tyrannical dictator responsible for so much suffering.
Yeah, that stark contrast. It's precisely what makes understanding Amin such a challenge. He was a master of deception, able to present this carefully constructed persona to the world, all the while hiding his true nature. But if we dig deeper,
Yeah.
beyond the surface, we can perhaps find clues in his past that hint at the darkness to come.
You're referring to his upbringing.
Exactly. A childhood marked by poverty and limited opportunities. It undoubtedly shaped his worldview. Joining the army, for him, it was a path to survival, a way to escape the confines of his circumstances. But within that rigid structure of the colonial military, he also encountered a system that rewarded, well, brute force and obedience, turning a blind eye to his excesses as long as he delivered results.
So in a way, Ayman was a product of the very system he later rebelled against.
In a sense, yes. He learned the tools of oppression from his colonial masters, internalized them, and ultimately wielded them with devastating consequences when he seized power. It's a tragic irony, really. It highlights the long-lasting impact of colonialism and the complex dynamics of power.
It's a reminder that history isn't just a collection of names and dates. It's about real people, their motivations, their flaws, and the forces that shape their destinies.
And in Amin's case, his story serves as a chilling cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition, the seductive allure of power, and the devastating consequences of exploiting, well, ethnic and religious divisions for personal gain.
We've talked about Iman's rise and fall, the brutality of his regime, his unpredictable actions on the world stage. But what about the people of Uganda? What about the victims? How do we reconcile their suffering with the conflicting narratives that surround Amin's legacy?
That's the most crucial question, isn't it? We can analyze Amin's personality, dissect his political maneuvers, but we must never forget the human cost of his actions. The countless lives lost, the families torn apart, the lasting trauma inflicted on a nation. Those wounds, they run deep and continue to shape Uganda's present.
The resilience is remarkable. They survived, rebuilt their lives, and continue to strive for a better future.
Their story is a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, the ability to find hope even in the face of unimaginable darkness. It's a reminder that even as we grapple with the complexities of history, we must honor the victims, their stories, and their fight for justice and healing.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the life of Idi Amin, what's the key takeaway you hope our listeners will ponder?
For me, it's the importance of critical thinking, of questioning narratives, of refusing to accept, well, simplified versions of history. Amin was a monster, yes, but he was also a man, a product of his time, his experiences, and his deeply flawed choices. To truly understand his legacy, we must engage with this uncomfortable truth, recognizing the complexities of human nature and the enduring impact of the past on the present.
And perhaps by understanding the factors that allowed someone like Amin to rise to power, we can be more vigilant in recognizing the warning signs, the subtle erosions of democracy and human rights, and work to prevent such tragedies from happening again. That's a responsibility we all share. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the complex and haunting legacy of Idi Amin.